Hey guys, so you may remember when you're looking at ancient Greece, you learn about a guy named Aristotle. That's him right here. So, Aristotle was a philosopher and kind of a pseudoscientist, and he had a lot of beliefs about the way that the world worked. So, let's look at some of those beliefs. So, one, Aristotle believed that heavy things fall faster than lighter things. That makes sense, right? He also believed that the earth was the center of the universe, not the sun, not any other planets, the earth. He also believed that some people, not all people, but some people, are biologically programmed to be slaves. So it's in their DNA that they're slaves. He believed that fossils are just fish that turned into stone, which honestly, that's not too far off. He believed that women were unfinished men and that they never grew the things that they needed to become men when they were in the womb. Kind of as a related to that, he also believed that women had fewer teeth than men. I feel like that could be disproven pretty easily. He believed that the uterus was not an organ that had a place in the human body, but it floats around a human body, causing women to become hysterical. And in fact, hysteria was a scientific diagnosis for women. He also believed that the size of the human's testicles determine the pitch of your voice. So the bigger they are, the deeper your voice is. And that's why women's voice are higher pitched because they don't have any. And last, of course, but not least, he believed these last two weird things that eels and some other animals don't reproduce, they naturally respawn, and that the brain is actually not a very important organ, and it is in fact the heart that controls the human body and thoughts. So he's wrong about kind of all of these. However, he was so respected as a philosopher that his beliefs were held to for almost 1,000 years after he died. Thank God, during the Renaissance, we also enter a new age, which is the age of the scientific revolution. So we see sort of the beginning of science start to happen during the Renaissance. And science beforehand was a very different kind of thing. Science didn't really exist. In fact, the world was really based on superstition. And these superstitions, many of them came from the ancient Greek and Roman writers that had carried on through the centuries. Some of them came from the Bible. Some of them came just from some very flawed beliefs that people have. So some of those beliefs are the geocentric view of the universe, also known as the Ptolemaic view. So this is what I was talking about with Aristotle, that the Earth is the center of the universe, and the planets and the sun all rotate around the Earth, and that we live in kind of a dome, and the stars are outside that dome, and that they are separate things that are not moving necessarily in the sky. They also believed that Aristotle basically knew everything. They always went back to Aristotle when anything happened. They believed that and religion should view the world. Uh, Everything that they needed to know about science was in the Bible. And in fact, what we would call science was actually a branch of theology or religious study. And so if it wasn't in the Bible, it probably wasn't important. There was also some really severe limited medical knowledge at the time. This is partly because during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, it was illegal to dissect the human body, believing that that body would not be able to resurrect in the end days if you did that. However, during the Renaissance, some people started to sneakily dissect human corpses, people like Leonardo da Vinci, to kind of learn how the human body worked because people didn't really understand the nervous system or the circulatory system or anything in the human body, really. Um, but really, the way science worked is something called deductive reasoning. And basically, what people did is they started with the conclusion and then found evidence to prove their conclusion. And it's often easy to find the evidence you want when you're trying to prove something, right? Rather than the other way around and trying to um, come up with the solution. You already have the solution. You believe you already know the answer, but you're trying to fit the evidence into proving that. And that is why scientific knowledge was so limited. However, during the Renaissance, a shift begins to happen. A new branch of philosophy begins to be taught called natural philosophy, and universities begin to establish mathematics, astronomy, and physics departments, but they do it within their philosophy department. So for a long time, science is seen as a branch of philosophy, which makes it a little bit more palatable for people. There is also a new scientific method that's being discovered. And really, some of the big proponents of this are two guys named Francis Bacon and Rene Descartes. And this is the opposite of deductive reasoning. This is known as inductive reasoning. And basically, this is all about what you can observe. And you start with your hypothesis and then find your conclusion. So rather than fitting the evidence to the conclusion, you find the evidence. And if it disproves your initial hypothesis, great. You're just trying to come up with the correct answer. And this is still the scientific method that we use today. They also, because of exploration, there leads to a need for scientific advancement. If you're going to sail boats further than they've ever been sailed before, you need to be able to understand the stars and the sun and the horizon and the curvature of the earth. And so new technologies are being created to make exploration a little bit easier, which leads to this new scientific interest in the heavens and astronomy. And there is this idea that we begin to challenge some of these ancient authorities. People like Aristotle, maybe they didn't know everything. And so as people are studying these ancient authorities and noticing that the things that these ancient people came up with didn't match with the observations that they were making, they started to question that. Renaissance patronage also allows scientists to really focus on their work. So now we're not just patronizing artists, they were patronizing scientists as well. So paying scientists to allow to do their work. And then as these scientists were working, they were able to spread their ideas much more easily because of the printing press. And so as all of these things kind of come together, it leads to a vast shift in scientific thought and knowledge. And many of the ideas that we have today come from this era. Things about the way the human body works, the way that the heavens and astronomy works, physics, biology, chemistry, all of these things really begin here. And we'll get more into that in class. And until then, I'll talk to you next time. Bye.